The divorce papers hit the marble floor. Zara Mensah watched them fall the way you watch something fall that you've always known was going to break. Her hands trembled, but she refused to let them see. 6 years. 6 years of hope measured in 2-week increments. Fertility clinics. Injections. Smiles that died in silence. And now, standing in this mansion, the woman who had never truly accepted her was telling her she had only 1 hour to leave. Her husband didn't defend her. He had already made his decision. 1 hour. 1 life. And 1 question: what do you do when everything you fought for crumbles before your eyes? The divorce papers hit the marble floor, and Zara Mensah watched them fall the way you watch something fall that you had known, somewhere deep and unacknowledged, was always going to fall. She didn't move to pick them up. Her hands were trembling too badly for that, and she refused, had always refused, in this house especially, to let them see her hands shake. 6 years. 6 years of fertility clinics and injections and hope measured out in 2-week increments. Hope that died every month like something small and wordless. Hope that her husband's family had watched die with expressions that moved, over time, from polite sympathy to something considerably less polite. 6 years of learning to make herself smaller in rooms that had never fully accepted her, of being simultaneously too foreign and not foreign enough, of being the Nigerian wife who spoke serviceable Japanese and excellent Korean and still could not, it seemed, do the one thing that would have made all of it worthwhile in the eyes of the Chun family. Mrs. Chun stood in the doorway of the Osaka mansion's main reception room with the particular stillness of a woman who had decided something irrevocable and was now simply waiting for the logistics to catch up. She was elegant in the way that certain cruelties were elegant, precise, composed, designed to land cleanly. "You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings," she said. "The household staff will ensure you leave with only what was yours before you came into this family." Zara's throat tightened. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That is not a question I'm able to help you with." Mrs. Chun's voice didn't rise or harden. It didn't need to. "You should have considered your options before entering a marriage you were constitutionally unequipped for." The word constitutionally was a new addition. Usually Mrs. Chun was more direct. Usually it was just barren, spoken in Korean when she thought Zara wasn't close enough to hear, which Zara always was. "You came to this family with nothing," Mrs. Chun continued, her eyes moving over Zara with the impersonal assessment of someone cataloging a failed investment. "You cannot give my son the heir this family requires. You are not Korean. You are not Japanese. You have not been, in 6 years, anything more than a complication we were generous enough to accommodate." Zara looked at Taewon. He was standing near the window with his back slightly angled away from the room, a posture she recognized as his way of not quite being present for things he preferred not to witness. She had spent 6 years learning his particular ways of being absent while technically present. She had become, she realized now, fluent in the language of a man who was always partly somewhere else. "Taewon." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Are you going to say anything?" He turned. The expression on his face was the one she had feared most, the one she had seen assembling itself over the last 2 years. Not cruelty, which would have been easier, but exhaustion. The exhaustion of a man who had made a decision and was waiting for everyone else to accept it. "My mother is right," he said quietly. "I'm sorry, Zara. I need a family. A real family. I need a son. You can't give me that, and I've waited long enough." 7 words that ended 6 years. She looked at him for a long moment. At the face she had loved, at the man she had followed to Osaka and then to Seoul and then back to Osaka, at the person she had made herself smaller for, month by month, until she could barely remember the woman she had been before. "Fine." She surprised herself. The word came out clean and without tremor. She straightened her spine. "I'll leave, but I'm taking the car. The white Audi. I paid for it before we married." Mrs. Chun's expression didn't shift. "You'll take nothing. Everything you have was provided by this family's generosity. You'll leave with your clothes and your passport, and you'll be grateful we're not pursuing the visa complications your presence has already created." Zara looked at her mother-in-law for one long, clear moment. Then she turned and walked upstairs. The bedroom they had shared, The bedroom where she had cried herself to sleep more times than she would ever tell anyone, where she had stared at ceilings at 3 in the morning calculating how many more months of hope she had left, where her marriage had dissolved so slowly it had been almost imperceptible until suddenly it was over. She packed a single bag.
Passport. Phone.
Her mother's bracelet, gold and worn. The only thing she owned that predated all of this. A few clothes. She left the jewelry Taewon's family had given her on the dresser. She left the photographs. She left 6 years of attempting to belong somewhere she had never quite fit. The household security met her at the bottom of the stairs. 2 men, expressionless, whose function was transparent. She walked past them to the front door, through the gate, and out onto the street. Osaka's November rain received her, without sentiment. It was cold and thorough, soaking through her coat before she had walked half a block. She kept walking. She didn't have a destination. She just needed distance between herself and the gate of that house, and then more distance, and then more. The streets of the Namba district blurred around her. Neon signs in 3 languages, the smell of street food and rain-soaked concrete, clusters of people moving with the purposeful efficiency of a city that didn't pause for anyone's grief. She had loved this city once, or had tried to make it hers. It had never quite agreed. She walked until her feet ached and the cold had moved from her skin into her bones, and then she found herself in Amerikamura, the district where the city's international community had always gathered, where her dark skin attracted glances, but not the particular quality of glance she had grown accustomed to in the Chun family circles. She sat on a bench near the covered shopping arcade and let the rain fall around her. Her phone showed 27 missed calls, all from Taewon's family lawyer. She didn't need to answer to know the substance. The prenuptial agreement she had signed 6 years ago, signed because she had trusted love, signed because she had believed that the need to protect yourself from the person you were marrying was a failure of faith, meant she left with nothing she hadn't brought. 6 years of her life, fully spent, returned at 0. Her visa was tied to the marriage. She had 30 days. She closed her eyes and sat in the rain and tried to find, somewhere inside the wreckage, something solid to stand on. A car pulled up. Not an ordinary car. A black Mercedes S-Class with windows the color of a starless night, the kind of vehicle that communicated wealth so absolute it had moved past display into simple fact. It stopped at the curb directly in front of her bench. The rear window descended. Zara. Her name, in a voice that was low and unhurried and slightly rough at the edges, the voice of someone who spoke carefully because every word was chosen. Get in. She opened her eyes. The man in the back seat was Korean, somewhere in his mid-30s, with a face that had been assembled from angles so precise they looked architectural, high cheekbones, a jaw that didn't compromise, dark eyes with the particular quality of focus that made you feel, when they landed on you, that everything else in the room had been briefly suspended. He wore a black suit with the ease of someone who had never worn anything else. There was a stillness about him that was not passivity. It was the stillness of something that moved when it decided to, and not before. She had never seen him in her life. How do you know my name? Get in the car. Not unkind. Not a request either. Every sensible instinct she possessed told her to stand up and walk away. She was aware of this. I don't know you. I know you. He said it simply, without drama, the way someone stated a logistical fact. I know you were married to Chun Tae-won for 6 years. I know his family removed you from their home tonight. I know your visa expires in 30 days, and you have nowhere to go. His eyes held hers. I know your name is Zara Mensah, that you grew up in Accra, that you have a first-class degree in economics that you never used because you moved to Osaka for a man who just told you you're expendable. A pause. Get in the car. I'm offering you a choice. She got in. The door closed behind her with the soft precision of something very well engineered. The car was warm and smelled of expensive leather and something else, a cologne that was dark and quiet and not aggressive. The city moved past the windows. He extended his hand. Ryu Seo-jun. She took it. His grip was firm and deliberate, the grip of a man who had learned early that how you shook hands told people everything they needed to know. You already know who I am. I wanted you to know who I am. He settled back against the seat and looked at her with that same complete, unhurried attention. I own the majority of Osaka's entertainment district. 3 hotels, 2 private clubs, a restaurant group, and several enterprises that don't appear in public filings. Your ex-husband's family owes my organization 4 billion yen. His father took a loan 18 months ago and has been managing the repayment schedule through a combination of delay tactics and the assumption that his family name makes him untouchable. His expression didn't change. He assumed incorrectly. Zara processed this. What does that have to do with me? The Chun family's social standing is their primary leverage. Their reputation in Osaka's business community is the thing that makes them feel invincible. He looked at her steadily. I need a wife. For business reasons, there are partnerships and negotiations where a man's personal stability is read as professional stability. I need someone beside me who is credible, composed, and unafraid. He tilted his head slightly. And there is nothing that would unsettle the Chun family's sense of invincibility more thoroughly than watching the daughter-in-law they discarded tonight become the wife of the man their patriarch owes 4 billion yen to. The car moved through Osaka's lights. Zara stared at him. You're asking me to enter a fake marriage. I'm offering you a weapon.
His voice was even.
Your ex-husband's family told you that you were worthless. I'm offering you the opportunity to demonstrate, publicly and comprehensively, that they were wrong about everything. He paused. In exchange, you have a visa that doesn't expire, an apartment in the best building in Namba, financial independence, and the freedom to live your life however you choose. In public, you are my wife. In private, you are completely your own person. And if I say no, then I drive you back to Amerikamura and wish you good luck. He said it without a trace of manipulation. I don't coerce people, Zara. This is a choice. She looked out the window at the city, at the rain on the glass and the lights of a city that had never quite claimed her. She thought about 30 days. She thought about her economics degree, sitting unused. She thought about the expression on Taewon's face, not cruelty, exhaustion, and felt something in her chest harden into something she recognized as the opposite of grief. Tell me what the arrangement looks like practically, she said. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. The acknowledgement of a man who had expected yes, and was now moving to logistics. You have the penthouse floor. I maintain a separate residence on the floor below. We appear together at events I specify, usually 2 or 3 per month. You are free to pursue any professional or personal interests you choose. There are no other requirements. And the Chun family. We'll see you at the Osaka Business Council Gala in 2 weeks. Every significant family in this city will be there, including the Chuns. His eyes held hers. They threw you out in the rain tonight. In 2 weeks, they'll watch you walk into the most important room in Osaka on my arm. Zara was quiet for a long moment. Then, yes. The penthouse was an argument against everything the Chun family mansion had been. That house had been grand in the way of places designed to communicate ownership, large, imposing, full of objects that announced their own value. This apartment was different. Floor-to-ceiling windows that made Osaka feel like it was inside rather than outside. Furniture that was beautiful without performing its beauty. Art that had been chosen rather than displayed. A kitchen that was larger than most of the apartments she had lived in before Taewon. She stood in the master suite at midnight, still in her rain-soaked coat, and looked at her reflection in the full-length mirror. She barely recognized the woman looking back. 6 years of being measured and found wanting had done something to her face, had drawn it inward, made it careful and watchful and small. The woman in the mirror looked like someone bracing for impact. She was done bracing. Her phone buzzed. Taewon, finally. She looked at his name on the screen for a long moment. She answered. Zara. His voice carried the specific strain of a man who had done something he was beginning to reconsider the optics of. Where are you? Are you okay? I can arrange a hotel for tonight if you need. I'm fine, she said. I don't need a hotel. You're not. Where are you staying? Do you have money? I can. Taewon.
She stopped him gently.
I'm getting married. Silence. What? Tomorrow. Civil ceremony. She kept her voice light, almost conversational. I've met someone. He wants me. Entirely. Without conditions.
She paused.
I thought you should know before you heard it elsewhere. The silence on his end had a different quality now. That's, Zara. You can't just. Who is this person? You don't even. Good night, Taewon. She hung up, set the phone face down on the dresser, walked to the window and looked out at Osaka, at the city that had broken her and was, apparently, not yet finished with her. Somewhere below, Ryu Seo-jun was in his apartment planning their next move. She stood at the glass and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but the specific sensation of being at the beginning of something rather than the end. The dress that had been left for her was deep blue, simple and cut exactly right. The shoes were her size. She had no idea how he had known, and she had learned, in the last 2 hours, that asking Ryu Seo-jun how he knew things was likely a question without a satisfying answer. She would ask tomorrow. Tonight she stood at the window and let herself feel the strange, precarious electricity of a life that had just, without warning, changed direction completely. The morning of the civil ceremony arrived before she had fully processed the night before. Ryu Seo-jun was already in the car when she came down at noon, wearing the charcoal suit as if it had been designed specifically to make him look like a man who never had to raise his voice because he never needed to. He looked at her when she got in, a single, complete look, the kind that covered the whole picture without lingering unnecessarily. You look exactly right, he said. I look like I slept 4 hours. She settled into the seat. I did sleep 4 hours. You look like a woman who has decided something, he said. That's the same thing. The registry office was quiet and functional, stripped of ceremony in a way that Zara found, unexpectedly, more honest than her first wedding's elaborate staging. The clerk had seen this before. She could tell from the efficient neutrality of the woman's expression and processed their paperwork without editorializing. They signed. They were pronounced. They stepped back out into the gray Osaka morning as Mr. and Mrs. Ryu. On the steps outside, he reached into his jacket pocket and produced a ring. Not the ostentatious declaration she might have expected, a single stone, deep blue like the sea at considerable depth, set in a platinum band of clean, architectural simplicity. He slid it onto her finger without ceremony. It matches the dress from last night, she observed. Yes. He glanced at it briefly. I had it made 2 days ago. She looked up at him. 2 days ago you didn't know I'd say yes. I knew what the Chun family was going to do. His voice was even. I didn't know if you'd accept, but I wanted to be ready if you did. He met her eyes. I don't like being unprepared. She looked down at the ring on her finger. It was cool against her skin and heavier than she expected, the good kind of heavy. The kind that felt like something real. 2 weeks until the gala, she said. 2 weeks. He opened the car door. Use them well.
She did.
She bought clothes with the credit card he left on the kitchen counter, not because she needed permission but because she was done being told she needed permission for things that were hers. She got her hair done the way she had wanted it for years and had been subtly discouraged from. The natural texture of it gathered into something that felt, when she looked in the mirror, like herself. She walked through Osaka streets like someone who was allowed to be in them. She ate alone at restaurants she chose herself and read the economics papers she had stopped reading when she stopped believing she would ever use her degree again. Ryu Seo-jun was rarely home. When he was courteous and direct and never intrusive. He had meals sent up without comment. He asked once, passing her in the hallway, whether she needed anything, and when she said no he nodded and moved on without making an event of it. He was, she observed, a man who understood that respecting someone's space was its own form of care. They had dinner together twice in those 2 weeks. Both times at the kitchen table. She had suggested it, and he had agreed, without the flicker of surprise she might have expected from a man accustomed to restaurants where the bill arrived in a leather portfolio. He was interesting to talk to in the way that people with genuine interior lives were interesting. He had opinions that didn't perform themselves, and he listened the way people listened when they were actually tracking what you said rather than waiting for their turn. She told him about Accra on the second evening, about the city she had grown up in, about the specific quality of light there at 6 in the evening, about her mother and the bracelet and the economics degree and the plans she had made for herself before Taewon. He listened without the particular quality of careful attention that meant someone was managing their reaction to the content rather than simply receiving it. He said at the end, "You gave up a great deal for a man who had decided in advance what he wanted from you. I know that now. Did you know it then?" She considered it honestly. "I knew something was wrong. I told myself the wrong thing was me." He was quiet for a moment. "That's what they wanted you to believe." He looked at her across the table. "It was never you." She looked back at him. In the kitchen light, with the Osaka night visible through the window behind him, he looked less like the dangerous man she had gotten into a car with 2 weeks ago, and more like a person. Someone who had built something enormous and was sitting at a kitchen table with a woman he had married for tactical reasons and was, apparently, capable of conversation that wasn't tactical. "What about you?" she said. "You said revenge doesn't heal what's broken." That sounded like experience. He turned his glass on the table. A small, contained gesture. "My father built this organization. When he died, his associates expected to divide it. I was 26. They thought I was too young and too foreign. I'd been in Japan since I was 10 to hold it." He looked at the glass. "I spent 4 years destroying every person who had moved against my father's legacy. By the time I was done, I had the organization, and I had nothing else." He met her eyes. "Revenge is a full-time occupation. It doesn't leave room for anything else." "Then why do this?" she said. "Why offer it to me?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because watching you walk through that rain," he stopped. Started again, more carefully. "You had just lost everything, and you were still moving forward, without stopping." His voice was even, but something in it had shifted slightly. "I've spent years being surrounded by people who collapse under pressure, or people who never feel it at all. I'd forgotten there was a third kind." He held her gaze. "The kind that feels it completely and keeps moving anyway." The gala arrived on a Thursday evening. Zara stood in front of the penthouse mirror in an emerald gown that had been fitted to her specifically, its color chosen. She now understood, because it would make her impossible to overlook in a room full of people who had spent years overlooking her. The back was low, and the cut was unapologetic, and she looked, she thought, exactly like a woman who had stopped apologizing. Ryu Seo-jun appeared in the doorway. He was in a black tuxedo, and he stopped when he saw her. For a man who was consistently, deliberately composed, the pause was significant. "Zara." Her name in his mouth had changed in 2 weeks. She had noticed this without examining it. "Too much," she said. "Not enough." He crossed the room. "Not nearly enough for what you deserve to look like tonight." He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. His hand lifted toward her face, and he paused. "May I?" She nodded. His fingers settled against her jaw, and the touch was so gentle it seemed improbable from hands that she knew, in the abstract, had done considerably less gentle things. "Every person in that room tonight is going to see exactly what the Chun family threw away," he said quietly. "Every person in that room is going to understand the magnitude of what they did." His thumb moved along her cheekbone. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready for 6 years," she said. "I just didn't have anywhere to aim it." His smile, when it came, was not the sharp, controlled expression she had seen him produce for tactical purposes. It was smaller than that and less expected, and considerably more real. "Then let's give them something to aim at," he said, and offered her his arm. The Osaka Business Council Gala occupied the entire grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton Osaka, a space that had been designed to make power feel comfortable and everyone without it feel appropriately conscious of the fact. Chandeliers like suspended galaxies. Champagne that had been selected by someone with opinions about champagne. The entirety of Osaka's business and social establishment arranged across 5,000 square meters of polished floor, all of them performing the complex, multi-layered theater of being important in front of other important people. Ryu Seo-jun's hand rested at the small of her back as they entered. Light. Steady. Present. The room turned. Not all at once, These were people too practiced in social performance to be obvious, but in the way rooms turned when something happened that disrupted the established narrative. She heard it begin in the nearest cluster, felt it ripple outward like something dropped into still water. Is that Ryu Seo-jun? Who is she? I've never seen her before. She's extraordinary. Is she? Wait, isn't that? And then she saw them. The Chun family stood in a cluster near the center of the room, Mrs. Chun holding court with the wives of two board members, Taewon's father in conversation nearby, Taewon himself, and beside him a woman. Young, delicately pretty, Korean, wearing white. The woman his family had undoubtedly been considering for some time. The woman for whom Zara had been made unnecessary. Taewon saw her first. She watched it happen. Watched his face go through several things in rapid succession: recognition, disbelief, the specific kind of shock that came from encountering someone you had last seen diminished, and finding them the opposite of that. He went pale. His mouth opened slightly. Ryu Seo-jun's hand pressed gently against her back. She felt him lean fractionally closer. "Breathe," he said, barely above a whisper. "And smile."
Not at them.
"Just smile." She smiled. It came from somewhere real. Not performance, not strategy, but the genuine, incandescent sensation of a woman who has been standing in the rain for 6 years and has just stepped into the sun. Taewon broke from his group and crossed toward them. He had the look of someone who had decided they needed to address something and had not fully worked out what they were going to say before starting to move. His mother followed 3 steps behind, her composure reassembling itself as she walked. "Zara." Taewon stopped in front of them. His eyes moved between her and Ryu Seo-jun with a quality of calculation she recognized, assessing, comparing, arriving at conclusions he didn't like. "I didn't know you'd be here. I go where my husband goes." She said it simply, without heat. "Taewon, you know Ryu Seo-jun." The name landed. She watched it land on Taewon's father behind him, watched the older man's expression shift from social pleasantry to something considerably more alert. She watched Mrs. Chun's composure, which was extraordinary, develop the first hairline crack she had ever seen in it. Ryu Seo-jun extended his hand to Taewon with the particular courtesy of a man who was being polite as a form of dominance. "Congratulations on your recent changes," he said. "I understand you're moving quickly. I hope the new arrangement gives you everything you were looking for." His voice was even and warm and contained, like a blade that hadn't been drawn yet. "Zara tells me the transition was abrupt. I'm grateful for it. If things had gone differently, I wouldn't have had the extraordinary good fortune of persuading her to marry me." Taewon shook the hand. He was too well-bred not to. "You married her." "Not quite a question." "You've known her. How long have you?" "Long enough to know what she's worth," Ryu Seo-jun said pleasantly. "Which, I'd guess, is longer than you." Mrs. Chun stepped forward. Her recovery was impressive. "Mr. Ryu, what a surprise. We had no idea you and Zara were acquainted." Her voice was smooth and careful, the voice of a woman rapidly recalculating. "She never mentioned. She didn't need to mention me until there was something to mention." Ryu Seo-jun smiled. It was a completely composed, entirely beautiful, and slightly terrifying smile. "I believe you, and I share a connection through your husband's business, Mrs. Chun. Perhaps we can find a moment this evening to speak about that. I know Kenji has been wanting to finalize the outstanding arrangement." He held her gaze for 1 beat exactly. "I prefer to handle things in person." The color that left Mrs. Chun's face was extraordinary to witness. Zara leaned slightly into Ryu Seo-jun's side, not for support but because she wanted to, and because she had decided in this room, on this evening, that she was done moderating her own impulses for the benefit of people who had never moderated theirs. "Enjoy the evening," she said to her former mother-in-law, with a warmth that was completely genuine in the specific way that warmth was genuine when it cost you nothing. "You look well." They moved away. Through the crowd, toward the champagne, toward a cluster of guests who greeted Ryu Seo-jun with the kind of warmth reserved for people who were genuinely respected rather than merely feared. He introduced her each time. His wife, Zara. The words were simple and factual, and each time he said them she felt them as something more than a transaction. Later they found their way to the balcony. The Osaka night was cold and clear, the city spreading below in its particular way, less aggressive than Tokyo, warmer than Kyoto, a city that moved at a pace that suggested it had somewhere to be but wasn't anxious about getting there. She stood at the railing with her champagne and felt the evening settle around her. Ryu Seo-jun stood beside her. He had been quieter since they came outside, and she had come to understand that his quietness was not absence, but a different kind of presence.
That worked, she said.
Yes. Your face when you told Mrs. Chun you wanted to discuss the outstanding arrangement. She almost smiled. She looked like she'd swallowed something. 4 billion yen tends to produce that effect. He turned his glass slowly. Her husband will call my office tomorrow morning. And I'll decide then what I want from the negotiation. He looked at her. The leverage was always there. You made it more elegant. She turned to face him. The balcony light caught the angles of his face, and she thought, not for the first time in the last 2 weeks, that he was genuinely, disconcertingly beautiful in a way that seemed almost beside the point given everything else about him. Can I ask you something honestly? You can ask me anything. Did you mean it? What you said about fire, about what you saw when you watched me walk through the rain. Or was that just a very good opening line? He was quiet for a moment. The city hummed below them. I've used opening lines, he said finally. I know what they feel like when I'm saying them. He turned to look at her directly. That wasn't one. She held his gaze. There was something in his eyes she had been noticing and not naming for 2 weeks, and she found now that she didn't want to continue not naming it. She didn't move first. He didn't move first. And then, in the way of things that have been building without permission, they were kissing, and it was nothing like what she had been afraid intimacy might feel like after 6 years of intimacy that had made her feel inadequate. This felt like choice. Like something she was doing because she wanted to do it with a man who was kissing her back like he had also decided rather than like he was fulfilling a requirement. He pulled back. His forehead rested against hers. This wasn't in the arrangement, he said.
No.
She stayed close. Does that matter? He exhaled slowly. It matters that I want it to be real.
His voice had changed.
The professional precision had gone out of it, and something more careful had replaced it. I'm not very good at. I've spent a long time operating in a world where things are transactional, where wanting something means acquiring it through the correct mechanism. He met her eyes. I don't know how to want something the way I want this without turning it into a mechanism. Then don't. She put her hand against his chest. She could feel his heart, which was moving faster than his composure suggested. Just want it, without a mechanism. See what happens. He looked at her. What happens if I'm wrong for you? What happens if what I am, what I do, is too much? Seo-jun. She said his name the way she had been afraid to say it. I have spent 6 years being told I was not enough. I don't need you to be perfect. I need you to be present. She held his gaze. Are you present? Yes, he said, without hesitation. Completely. Then that's enough, she said. For now, that's enough. They didn't go back inside. They drove back to the penthouse in the charged quiet of 2 people who have said something true and are living in the space just after it. When they stepped into the elevator, he pulled her close, and in the apartment doorway there was a moment of real, unglamorous uncertainty. 2 people on the edge of something irrevocable, both of them aware of what they were choosing. She chose.
He chose.
The city lights moved through the windows, and Zara Mensah, who had been told she was empty and worthless and constitutionally unequipped for the life she had wanted, found that her body remembered very well how to be alive.
How to want.
How to receive wanting in return without flinching. Ryu Seo-jun was present in the way he was present in every room, completely without reservation, with the focused attention of someone who understood that what was in front of him mattered. He looked at her like she was worth looking at. He touched her like she was worth touching. That was not a small thing. After, they lay in the dark with the city below them, and he pulled her close, and she let herself be pulled. This changed something, she said quietly. Yes. His voice was rough and quiet. Is that all right? She turned to look at him in the low light. Saw the vulnerability she had first glimpsed at the kitchen table, the real person beneath the dangerous competence.
It's all right, she said.
It's better than all right. They slept. Outside, Osaka continued its patient, amber-lit life, indifferent to the fact that inside a penthouse on its 23rd floor, two people who had started as a transaction were becoming something neither of them had planned for, and both of them, it turned out, had needed. Morning arrived with pale winter light and the smell of coffee. Zara woke to find Ryu Seo-jun already awake, watching the city from the bed with a stillness that she was beginning to understand was simply how he inhabited quiet moments. He turned when she moved. The expression on his face was the one she had seen at the kitchen table, unguarded, genuine, the version of him that existed when the professional precision had nothing to perform.
Good morning, he said.
His voice was rougher in the morning, which she found she liked. Good morning. She pushed her hair back from her face. You're awake. I'm always awake early. He turned back to the window briefly. Habit. A 6 years of dangerous work habit? A 10 years of being 26 in a room full of people who wanted that habit. He said it without drama, the way he said most things. You learn to be a light sleeper. She sat up. Outside, Osaka was assembling itself into a Tuesday morning, the distant sound of the first trains, the buildings beginning to catch the low winter light. Last night was a mistake, he said. Her heart dropped cleanly from her chest. The kind I intend to make again, he continued, and the smile that followed was the most unguarded thing she had seen from him. And again after that. Until further notice. She exhaled. You did that deliberately. I wanted to see what your face did. He was entirely unrepentant. It did something worth seeing. She threw a pillow at him. He caught it, which she should have predicted. They stayed in bed for most of the morning, which was something she had not done without guilt or scheduled checking in so long she had forgotten it was possible. He talked, more than she had expected from a man who seemed to have made an art of compression. He told her about Busan, where he had been born, about the particular quality of the sea there, about his father who had built the first pieces of the organization from nothing and had been, by all accounts, a man of genuine principle operating in a world that did not reward principle. He told her about arriving in Osaka at 10, about learning Japanese in the way children learned languages, completely and without self-consciousness, and then learning the city's geography the way a person learned something they intended to keep. She told him about the economics degree and what she had meant to do with it. The consultancy she had planned, the way she had imagined her 30s looking before Taewon's family had quietly, systematically narrowed the frame of what was available to her. She had not said these things aloud in 6 years. She had stopped, somewhere in year 3 of the marriage, telling people what she had planned because the telling had started to feel like self-indulgence, a rehearsal of a future that wasn't going to happen. Seo-jun listened. When she finished, he said, You should build it. The consultancy? You have the degree, 6 years of watching how a major family business operates from the inside, and I would guess, considerably better instincts about organizational dysfunction than most people who charge for those instincts. He held her gaze. You should build it. I can introduce you to 3 people this week who need exactly what you could offer. She looked at him. Just like that. Just like that. He said it with the particular certainty of a man who didn't waste time on qualifications when the logic was clear. She was quiet for a moment. No one has said that to me in 6 years, she said. Just do the thing you want to do. As if it were simple. It isn't simple, he said, but it's possible. The simplicity is just in deciding to start. She looked at him in the winter light and felt something she had been afraid to feel since the first night in his car, something she had been calling practicality and calling transaction and calling whatever words kept it manageable.
She felt it anyway.
Let it be what it was. The notification arrived mid-morning. His assistant sent it through, a news alert, a gossip column, the kind of story that spread through Osaka's social media channels the way fire spread through dry grass. Fast, indiscriminate, and interested only in burning. Someone at the gala had taken a photograph through the ballroom's glass doors. Zara and Seo-jun on the balcony, his forehead against hers, the city behind them, the image framed with the accidental artistry of something not meant to be art. The headline was not generous. Foreign divorcee and crime boss, Osaka's most controversial new couple. The article below covered her divorce, her nationality, her 6 years of failed fertility treatments. How that information had been obtained she could guess, but chose not to dwell on. And Seo-jun's organization, described with the particular energy of a publication that wanted to be scandalized and responsible simultaneously. The comments were worse. She read it once and set her phone down and looked out at the city. Seo-jun read it.
His jaw set.
I'll find out who took the photograph. I'll find out who sold the story. You'll find them, she said. And then what? The story is already out. Then I'll make them regret it. Seo-jun. She turned to him. His face was stone. She had seen this face, the one that made rooms go quiet, and she was finding, to her own mild surprise, that it didn't frighten her. The story is out. My face is out. My divorce is out. She picked up her phone again and looked at the photograph, at the image of herself, her back straight, her head tilted toward his, looking, she had to admit, extraordinary in the emerald gown. She looked like a woman who had arrived somewhere. Let it be out. He studied her. You're not upset. I'm furious, she said honestly. Someone sold my private medical history to a gossip column, and I want to do considerable harm to that person. She set the phone down. But I'm not going to hide. I'm not going to issue a statement about inappropriate coverage of my reproductive history or go quiet and wait for it to pass. She looked at him directly. You told me that night that you wanted to give me back what they took. My reputation, my dignity, my future. She gestured at the phone. They've taken a swing. So, let's give them something to actually write about. The slow, genuine smile that crossed his face was the most dangerous thing about him, she decided. More dangerous than the stillness, more dangerous than the precision. The smile of a man who had met his equal and knew it. What did you have in mind? He said. What followed was the most thoroughly public 2 weeks of Zara's life. They went everywhere. Restaurant openings and gallery previews, and the kind of charity events where the charity was secondary to the visibility. He introduced her to everyone who mattered in Osaka's business community, not as his wife in the ornamental sense, but as the person beside him, as someone with opinions worth hearing, as someone he visibly, consistently, and without apparent self-consciousness respected. She spoke in meetings he brought her to. She asked the questions she had been storing up for 6 years of watching organizational dysfunction from the inside of a family that embodied it. The coverage continued. Some of it was hostile. The gold digger narrative had enough momentum that it took time to slow. But other things began to appear alongside it. Photographs of her at a business discussion being listened to by men twice her age. A profile in an Osaka lifestyle publication that had gotten somehow the angle right. The economist who had set her career aside for a marriage, who was reassembling herself in real time. The consultancy she had been talking about with Seo-jun, quietly at first, then less quietly, began to take on the shape of a real thing. He made the introductions. She did the rest. The Chun family was publicly silent. Privately, she knew, from the messages still appearing on her phone that she read and no longer deleted, that the silence was costing them. Taewon's father had met with Seo-jun's lawyers twice. The outstanding debt negotiation had begun. She did not ask for details. She didn't need them. She could see the effect in the increasing frequency of his mother's messages, which had moved through fury and then appeal and now had reached something that sounded almost like acknowledgement. She deleted them. Gently, without satisfaction, the way you removed something that was no longer relevant. One night, 2 weeks after the gala, she was standing at the penthouse window late, her laptop open on the coffee table behind her, notes from a consultation meeting spread around it, and she felt, in the quiet of the apartment, in the particular quality of Osaka at midnight, the absence of something that had been with her so long she had stopped noticing it as a weight. The bracing. The constant low-level tension of someone who expected the floor to give way. It was gone. She was still standing at the window when Seo-jun came up from the floor below. He did this sometimes in the evenings, came up without fanfare, found her reading or working, sat in the chair across from her with his own work or simply in companionable silence. She had stopped finding it remarkable and started finding it simply part of the shape of the day. Still working, he said.
Thinking, she said.
About the absence of something. He came to stand beside her. Of what?
Fear, she said.
I've been afraid for 6 years. Not dramatically. Just constantly. The low-grade kind. The kind where you're always waiting for the next diminishment. She looked at the city. It's gone. He was quiet for a moment. Then, good. I know why. She turned to look at him. It's you. It's this. She gestured at the apartment, the city, the life that had materialized from a rainy bench in Amerikamura. I know it started as a transaction. It stopped being a transaction very quickly. His voice was even. Before the registry office, if I'm being precise. She looked at him. How before? When you got in the car. He held her gaze. You had every reason not to. Every sensible instinct was telling you not to. And you looked at me and made a decision in 5 seconds that most people would have deliberated for 5 days.
He paused.
That's when I knew the transaction was going to become something else. You could have told me. You needed time to find out for yourself. He turned to face her. You just spent 6 years being told that your judgment was wrong, your instincts were wrong, your body was wrong. You needed to arrive at your own conclusions about this. His eyes held hers. I wasn't going to push you toward me. I could wait. She stepped forward, eliminating the distance between them, put her hands against his chest, felt his heart, steady and present. I have a conclusion, she said. Tell me. I love you. She said it simply, without performance. I didn't plan to. It happened the way things happened around you, efficiently, and without a great deal of warning. But it's true, and I'd rather say it than not say it. He was very still for a moment, the kind of still that was not emptiness but the opposite of it, a fullness that had nowhere to go yet. I've been in love with you, he said carefully, since you threw a pillow at me and didn't apologize for it. She laughed. It came out surprised and genuine. That was 3 weeks ago. Some things don't require time. He cupped her face. I've spent my life moving fast on decisions when the logic was clear. The logic here has been clear since the moment you asked whether you had to pretend to have feelings or just pretend to be married. He pressed his lips to her forehead. I love you, Zara. Every exact thing that you are. They stood there in the lamplight while the city moved below them, and she felt the specific, profound simplicity of being in a place you have arrived at honestly, not by being told you belong there, but by finding your own way and discovering, at the end of it, someone already there who had also found their way. 3 months later, on a Thursday morning when the winter had begun its slow retreat and the first suggestions of Osaka's spring were visible in the plum trees along the river, Zara sat in a doctor's office and heard something she had stopped believing she would ever hear. The doctor said it clearly and without preamble, the way good news deserved to be delivered. You're pregnant, Mrs. Ryu. Approximately 8 weeks. Everything looks healthy. Zara sat with the information for a moment, then sat with it for another moment. The doctor, who had clearly seen this kind of silence before and recognized it correctly, gave her the space. 8 weeks. 8 weeks ago had been the week after the gala. The week that had changed everything. She drove back to the penthouse on autopilot, her mind doing what minds did when they encountered something too large to process through normal channels, going quiet, circling, not quite landing. She had been told over 6 years that her body was the problem. She had been measured and assessed and treated and told, gently but with clinical certainty, that her fertility was compromised by factors that were unlikely to resolve without significant intervention. She had undergone the intervention. It had not resolved. And now, here, without trying, without planning, in the first 3 months of a life that had completely remade itself, she found Seo-jun in his study. He looked up from his desk when she came in and read her face in the way he read everything, immediately and accurately. What happened? He stood. She told him. The silence that followed was the most complete she had experienced in his presence. He was absolutely still, and then he crossed the room in 3 strides and his arms came around her and he held on. She felt him breathing, felt the specific quality of his stillness, not the composed, professional stillness, but something raw, something that was working through something large. You're okay? His voice was muffled against her hair. You're both okay? Both of us are fine. She pressed her face into his neck. I thought I couldn't. 6 years of being told I couldn't. You weren't broken. His arms tightened. You were never broken. You were just with the wrong person. She pulled back enough to look at him. His eyes were wet at the edges, which she would never mention and would always remember. You said that a long time ago. I was right. He cupped her face. And now you're here. And this. He pressed his hand gently against her stomach, still flat. This fact that was changing everything is ours. Are you? She searched his face. This wasn't planned. This wasn't what we. Zara. His voice was firm and quiet and certain. I want everything with you. Every unplanned thing. Every revision to the plan. He kissed her forehead, her cheek, the corner of her mouth. I want you and our child and the consultancy you're building and the life we've been making. I want all of it. He pulled back to look at her. Is that clear? Extremely, she said. He smiled. The real one. The devastating one. Good, he said. Because I'd hate to have to repeat myself. The months that followed were full. Not in the frantic, exhausting way of her years in the Chun household, where fullness was a form of performance, but in the way of a life that was genuinely being lived. The consultancy became real. 2 clients became 5. A small office became necessary. Her economics degree found the application. She had always intended for it. Seo-jun was a resource when she wanted one, and entirely out of her way when she didn't, which was exactly the right proportion, and which she suspected he had calibrated deliberately. He became, in those months, more visible to her. Not as a person but as a father-to-be, which was its own revelation. He researched things. Quietly, without announcement, in the way he did everything, but she found the research. Books on developmental stages, a carefully annotated list of pediatric specialists in Osaka, a conversation she overheard him having with his grandmother about names. He painted the nursery himself on a Sunday, methodical and careful, the same way he approached everything. You painted the whole ceiling, she observed, appearing in the doorway. The ceiling is part of what a baby sees first. He didn't look away from his work. It should be good. She leaned against the doorframe and watched him and felt, with the specific and overwhelming force that it sometimes came with, how different this was. How different the exact same actions looked when performed by someone who did them out of choice rather than obligation. He was painting a ceiling because he wanted to, because the child was his and he had decided, with the same complete and quiet certainty he brought to all his decisions, that the ceiling should be good. She started laughing. He looked down. What? Nothing. She was still laughing. You're exactly who you are all the time. It's extraordinary. He regarded her for a moment. That's generally the goal. The baby arrived on a rain-soaked evening in early autumn, 3 weeks early, which meant the hospital bag was already packed and Seo-jun had already run the calculations on the fastest route to the hospital from every location they were likely to be in, which was exactly the kind of preparation she should have expected from him. He held her hand throughout in the specific way of a man who had decided that holding her hand was his function and was applying his full capability to it. His face was composed throughout, or mostly composed. She felt his grip tighten at certain moments in ways that told her what his face was carefully not telling her. When their daughter arrived, small and definitive and already clearly going to have opinions, the composure broke completely. She heard him make a sound she had never heard from him before, something that had no category, and when the doctor placed their daughter in his arms, he stood very still and looked at her face with the expression of a man encountering something that had exceeded all his calculations. She looks like you, he said. His voice was rough and stripped of everything except what was essential. She looks like both of us, Zara said. He looked up, eyes wet, expression undefended. She's perfect. She is, Zara agreed. They named her Adiz, her mother's name, a name from Accra, a name that carried the lineage of the woman Zara had been before Osaka had tried to unmake her. A name that said, this family began here, in this city, with these 2 people, and it carries everything that came before. Seo-jun said it carefully the first time, making sure he had it. Said it again. Practiced it until it was easy. His grandmother, who visited from Busan and held Adiz for 40 minutes without putting her down, said it in her own particular way, and the baby, impossibly, seemed to recognize something in it. The news of the Chun family's formal settlement with Ryu Seo-jun's organization came 3 months after Dee's was born. For billion yen, the full amount, transferred and documented. Taewon sent a brief message, not to Seo-jun but to Zara. She read it once. It said, in careful, correct English, "I'm glad you're well. I'm glad things worked out. I was wrong about a great many things." She showed it to Seo-jun. He read it without particular expression. "What do you want to do with it?" he asked. She thought about it for a moment. Then she went to the window. Their window, the one that looked out over Osaka's lights, the window that had watched her become something different over the last 2 years, and she thought about the woman who had sat on a bench in the rain and felt like it was possible to die from a broken heart. "Nothing," she said. "I don't need to do anything with it." She turned.
He's just the past.
"The past can't hurt me anymore." Seo-jun crossed the room, put his arms around her from behind. They looked at the city together, the amber lights of Osaka moving in the November dark, the city that had broken her and rebuilt her, the city that had given her, entirely against its own intentions, everything she had ever wanted. "You know what I've been thinking about," she said.
Tell me.
"That bench in Amerikamura. That I was sitting there thinking it was possible to die from a broken heart." She leaned back against him. "And that a car pulled up. And you got in," he said, against her hair. Despite every sensible instinct. Despite every sensible instinct. She covered his hands with hers. "Best decision I ever made. Best decision we both made." He pressed his lips to her temple. From completely opposite directions. Inside, Adiz was asleep in her room, the room with the good ceiling, the room full of yellow light and the soft colors of a future being assembled carefully by 2 people who understood, between them, the value of things built from wreckage. 5 years on, they stood on the same balcony where Zara had smiled her first real smile in 6 years, and Osaka was below them, and Adiz was asleep inside, and the question came the way certain questions came. Honestly, without prelude, in the space where the evening was quiet enough to hold it. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Any of it? The arrangement, the risk, me?" He considered it genuinely, the way he considered everything. "I regret that you had to go through what you went through before," he said. "I regret that the world gave you 6 years of being told the wrong thing about yourself." He turned to face her. "I don't regret a single decision I made from the moment I watched you stand up from that bench." His hand found her face. "You're the best thing I've ever done, Zara. Not the organization. Not the business.
You.
Adiz. This." He gestured at the night, the city, the life behind the glass. "This is what I built everything for, even when I didn't know it yet." She kissed him. Soft and unhurried and completely real, the kiss of 2 people who had arrived somewhere and had no intention of leaving. Behind them through the glass, Osaka glittered in the dark, indifferent and beautiful, a city that had once tried to make Zara Mensah disappear and had failed completely. She was here. She was seen. She was loved, not as a consolation or a transaction or a vessel for something else, but as herself, exactly and entirely, every unfinished and reconstructed piece of her. She had been thrown out in the rain and told she was nothing. She had been planted. And from everything they had tried to bury her with, she had grown into something they never saw coming. Tap the heart if this story stayed with you. Drop your city in the comments. I love knowing where in the world these stories land. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories where the ones who were counted out come back as the ones who can't be counted. Stay blessed and stay beautiful, and remember, you were never the problem. You were always the prize.